No Rest for the Wicked has a terrible new player experience. Now, No Rest for the Wicked tries to be the Dark Souls of ARPGs, and I don't say that lightly or as a clickbait term. They very clearly mean for it to be Dark Souls, except as an ARPG, a Diablo-esque game, right? They use many of the same mechanics. In fact, they use most of the same mechanics, and they use the same leveling processes and things like that. You don't even so much make a class as you put points into certain stats, much like it's a Souls game. It is very much, what if Dark Souls was an ARPG? With that said, I'm going to be comparing its early game experience to things like Diablo and to, well, Dark Souls, Elden Ring, because the new player experience for this game is absolutely miserable. It's absolutely terrible in every single way. And after you get out of the early game, the game improves so substantially, but I think basically the game is going to be bombarded with bad reviews and with people hating the game because the first 4 to 5 hours are some of the worst I think I've ever played in any game ever, actually. And if you're a developer who possibly came across this video, I very much do mean that. I'm 34 years old now. I continuously get older every year, and I swear to you, this is one of the worst new player experiences I've ever had. I truly believe they said that this game has been being made for 7 years. I believe them. I believe what happened is the developers have played this game for so long and they've been making it for so long that they've gotten too good at their game. They know too much about their game. And because of that, they assume that everyone else knows about their game and that everyone else knows how to play their game. And no one is going to make mistakes and everyone will cruise through the early game and know what they're doing. But they won't, because that's not how people are. Everyone needs to play the game the first time. So let's talk about what makes the new player experience in this game miserable. Number one, damage is way too low. I'm going to hopefully show some of the tutorial here. And I promise you, on the ship, if you see footage on the ship, all of that is a tutorial. In the tutorial, you have to zero out your stamina multiple times to kill an opponent. You don't just land one parry then kill an enemy as you would in a Souls game. You don't just hit them with a few abilities and they die like you would in a Diablo ARPG game. No, you need a parry, full combo, back off, regenerate your stamina, parry, full combo, and you might kill them. It is excessive. And because of that, even in the tutorial, you need to be playing bizarrely well for the early game of a Souls-like game. It's kind of weird, actually, how well they expect you to play as a new player. You can't just mash into enemies because they'll last through your entire stamina bar. You can land every single attack and they'll be at half HP and you'll have no stamina and you'll easily die. This is kind of absurd, really, because this is before you could possibly upgrade your weapon. This is before you could possibly find a new weapon drop. Later on, you could do those things, but the problem is, for the first 3, 4, 5 hours, you can't realistically get your weapon upgraded. You can't realistically get weapon drops unless you get crazy lucky, and damage is just absurdly low. I don't understand what really happened here. Okay, going along with that, enemies use way too many advanced moves way too early. In most Diablo games, enemies run up to you, you hit them, they die. In most Souls games, enemies run up to you, you whack, and they die. It's very easy to dispense of early game enemies. They're kind of here to just get hit and die. They're not really, they could offer you a challenge. If you let them hit you, they'll hit you and do good damage. But realistically, most enemies, you run up, you hit them, they get hit stunned, and they die. But that is not actually what happens in this game. They use way too many advanced moves way too early. Most early game enemies will do, instead of doing a single attack that then has downtime, most early game enemies will actually just use combos, 3-hit, 4-hit, 5-hit combos. And I'm talking the first enemies you'll be fighting are doing 3 to 5-hit combos. For a Souls player, this would be way too much. You don't even know your parry timings yet. You don't know your dodge roll timings. You don't have a shield yet, even if you're trying to fall back on a shield like you might in other games. So they're coming at you, and they're coming at you hard. And this becomes a problem when we go over healing later, okay? They don't just hit an attack and you back off and it misses, and then you whack and they die. Okay, in a Souls game, so you do it. A skeleton walks up to you, or sorry, a zombie would walk up to you and they go and they miss their attack because you backed off, and then you go whack and they die. In this game, in combination with damage being low, you could parry a hit full combo, and then they're going to come back at you with another combo. And if you mistime your parry, you're going to be down half your health bar, which, remember that for what I go over with next, okay? Many normal enemies, and I'm talking normal enemies, use just as advanced moves as the first boss does. I'm talking jumping in the air and slamming down on you, 3 to 5 hit combos, big heavy attacks, anything like that. Just to go over a few, a lot of enemies will hold their attacks to mess with your parry and dodge timers, which is just weird to me because you haven't even practiced parry, you haven't even practiced dodging yet, and yet you'll have these enemies that go and then hold their attack so that you use a parry and then they hit you. And they'll do this on like the first couple of enemies, which is bizarre. You have not even learned how to play this game yet, and you are getting mashed by enemies that are already countering the basic strategies you're trying to learn. Lots of enemies will actually have moves with very similar animations, one that will go really quick, one will go slow. So you'll have a spear guy, and the spear guy can either do a quick jab that you need to instantly parry, or he'll do a attack where he brings his spear back as if he's about to jab you, then he holds it, then he hits you. So if you don't recognize what he's doing, you'll see him pull his spear back and you parry really quick, trying to get the quick jab, and then, oh wait, he was holding it, and then he hits you. And again, these are like the earliest game enemies. I don't get it. Some of them, the shielded enemies, actually have block breaking attacks. So even once you do get the shield and you try to shield through these people, they actually have attacks that can just knock you out of your block and stun you. And it's a 2-hit combo, mind you. So the first hit knocks you out of your block, the second hit slams down, shield bashes you into a shield slam, and you lose like half your health bar because you tried to block them. Which again, I don't know how many times it is, where the first enemies are coming at you with all these advanced techniques, and so you think, okay, I'll get a shield that I'll block, and they're like, I can beat that too. It kind of feels really miserable, okay? I should specify here, block breaking moves will make shields feel terrible when in a lot of these games, shields are how you get through the early game and try to survive through enemies until you understand what you're even trying to do. Okay, the big two-handed axe enemies, you might think, well, I'll space them. I'll stay out of their range, I'll space them, and I'll try to counterattack them on their charge. But then they actually have firebomb moves, where if you stay too far away from them and you try to bait them to using their charge attack, they actually just start chucking firebombs at you. And these firebombs ignore dodge roll, and they will actually outrun sprint. I'm going to be honest, I haven't actually figured out how to beat them. Maybe you need a perfectly timed dodge roll, I'm not really sure. But if you try to space them too much, they chuck a firebomb that hit stuns you into a second firebomb, which lights you on fire, which starts taking you start taking a lot of damage. This is an early game enemy. It's weird. To finish is, many early game enemies have enough poise that even if you do run up and you try to hit them, A, you'll maybe only be able to do half their health bar with your entire stamina, but B, a lot of them actually have attacks that will go through the lighter one-handed weapons. You're not even guaranteed to get a two-handed weapon yet. You're not guaranteed to get these big poise damaging weapons that could maybe put them into a hit stun. So you run up to an enemy, you try to hit them, and oh wait, they 3 to 5 hit combo you and you lose half your health bar. Now, why do I keep mentioning that? Because let's go into the healing problem right here. Healing isn't given out each time you reach a save point. It's not. Each time you reach a save point, it does nothing. In fact, you don't even heal. Healing isn't free at all. Every single time you need to heal, you need to use a healing item. How do you get healing items? Well, in the early game, you get mushrooms and you get plants, and you combine them and you make mushroom soup. Okay, let's go into all the problems with this one. This means if you're trying to do a boss, if you're trying to do a boss, hold on, I just thought of something, I just thought of another huge problem that I didn't even specify in my little notepad here. Okay, so if you're trying to do a boss many times and you try him and you die and you try him and you die, okay, great, you're out of healing items. You need to go farm them. As a Souls fan, this sounds bizarre. as a Diablo fan, this would even sound bizarre. That's not really how games work anymore. You don't really do that. But okay, we're all the way back in Demon Souls. It's 2009 and we're playing Demon Souls for some reason. So you need to go farm them. You need to go around the map. You need to find mushrooms and plants and combine them into soup. Oh, it's old school, you say. That's not too bad. But here's the second problem. The respawn on these mushrooms and on these plants, they don't respawn when you die, because it's only one save. If you die, you just go back to the nearest checkpoint, right? You don't load a save, so to speak. You just respawn. But the respawns on these food items isn't based on you dying. It's based on real world time. Meaning, what is this problem here? Players can very easily run out of healing items entirely if they weren't aware that they needed to conserve. So now we have these very tough enemies that you might need to beat without any healing items. Now, enemies don't respawn every time you visit a save point, which is good. It means you can slowly clear through them, but they will slowly respawn over time, over real world minutes. And I think this is very important. This means you can't farm early game enemies to level up. And it means you can't farm early game healing items at all. In fact, here's the second problem. There does actually seem to be a lot of healing items in the game, but you need to do a crap load of exploration to find them. And a lot of this exploration is kind of hidden in sort of a Souls way, right? You might not notice that that wall was climbable. You might not notice that you could go back into the terrain, right? You might not notice that you could do some certain things. And people that have played the game before, they know, oh, well, there's like 70 mushrooms that are respawning in the first area. Why didn't you get them? Because I didn't know they were there. Because I didn't know, because I hadn't played this game before yet. And that's the problem, because you hadn't played the game yet. As a new player, you don't know where all the mushrooms are. You don't know where to get all the healing items. Sure, a seasoned player could be at 20 healing items. A new player could be at straight 0, not understanding what to do, constantly getting killed by the new enemies. You can find yourself very easily soft locked, not hard locked, but soft locked, literally waiting for mushrooms to respawn. Now, this goes into another problem, okay? Equipment breaks when you die. You take equipment damage every time you take a death. So we don't have respawning health potions, and equipment takes damage every time you die. So you might say, well, new players need to buy lots of healing items, but that's not how it goes. In fact, almost all my early game gold went to repairing my equipment because I kept dying because I didn't have any healing items. It kind of created a loop here, so to speak. I almost got to the point where I thought, am I actually soft locked? But I didn't. I did manage to get through it. Eventually I started to get better at pairing enemies. Eventually I could kill 1, maybe 2 without taking any damage. These are, I promise you, these are tougher enemies than in any other early game Souls or Diablo experience. Definitely Diablo enemies, way beyond Diablo enemies early game. But Souls enemies, I mean, these are like late game Souls enemies pretty early in the game. It's kind of ridiculous. And taking equipment damage every time you die means you have to go back and repair. Meaning, all the exploration you just did, all the things you did to try to find money might have just gone away, and now you're just spending all that money repairing your equipment. If you don't know, if you aren't aware that you need to conserve healing, if you aren't aware that you should spend your early game money buying more healing items, you could be taking a lot of deaths and just ending in a snowball loop, which is terrible. Okay, now let's talk about exploration. Exploration, the first zone, is extremely wacky. A lot of areas that you aren't aware that you can climb, you need to be climbing up to. A lot of areas that you aren't aware that you need to be going back into, you need to be going back there. That's to find healing items. That's to find, the mushrooms on the ground, stuff like that. That's to expand through the first zone. Going through the first zone to find the boss is a very linear experience. Everything after that relies on a lot of exploration. Why is this a problem? Oh, well, let's go into this, because right after you beat the first boss, which arguably you shouldn't even have been able to do, but many people will be able to beat him, either through spamming healing, which they managed to get through the first zone, or they'll manage to beat him because they've played Souls games before and they know how to dodge roll his attacks. Remember, most of the early game enemies are more difficult or just as difficult as the first boss, right? So you could have been prepared for this first boss, and although he is very tanky, you could get through him, okay? But here's the problem. Once you get through the first boss and you get to the first city, it will give you a quest to go into the next zone. The next zone has a substantial difficulty spike. There's little in the way telling you to go back into the first zone, and that you only explored about half of it, and by exploring the other half, you'll get more characters in the town, and you'll get more levels, and you'll get more upgrades, and you'll get more experience, and you'll get more levels again. There's little in the town telling you to do that. Now, there are some quests that will spawn seemingly eventually telling you to go back. But for me, the only thing telling me to go back in the first zone were daily quests. Yes, there are daily quests in this game. And I kind of ignored them because I thought, well, I don't want to do daily. So I went to the next zone, struggle bust my way through it, eventually kind of brute forced my way through it, hard ran out of healing, and realized, I don't think I'm supposed to be here anymore. This area is like way too difficult. So I went back, and then I realized, oh my God, there's a lot of exploration you can do, because you don't know if an area says needs the X key to get through. You don't know at first. You're new to the game. Is that key going to be in the first zone? Is it going to be in the second zone? Is it going to be the third zone? Am I backtracking from halfway in the game back into the first zone to go through another area? Well, for the most part, no, actually. Most of the progression through the first zone is in the first zone. I don't think there's any area you'll ever have to backtrack to from zones ahead of that. In particular, though, there is one difficult area where the key to finish off the first zone, the key to the final door, doesn't spawn until you go back into the city and take a quest. Then that quest will spawn a character next to the key. And that, I feel, is a little bit ridiculous. There's too much expected of the player to know to complete the first zone. And you don't need to do it technically, but it gives you a lot of experience and a lot of potential item drops that will enable you to get through that second zone way easier. Okay, now going on with this, getting a good enough character that you can start feeling comfortable with the game relies very heavily on previous Souls experience. For example, knowing to get just enough stats to use a weapon and then not anymore. So, for example, you want to get just enough strength to use the weapon you want to use, but not any more than that. And then you put the rest of those stats into health, into stamina, into carry capacity, and those sorts of things, okay? You need to know certain things that... although it will explain the weight classes to you in the game, it doesn't explain, let's say, the severity of going into a higher weight class. There's no warning that, hey man, actually, if you use better armor, that's great, you're going to take less damage, and later in the game, heavy armor can definitely be a viable strategy, more so than previous Souls games, going to, like 98% carrying capacity with a giga armored character. That's way more viable in this game, but early game, it is not. Early in the game, you're going to be mostly relying on dodge rolling, and the game, to be blunt, it doesn't make enough effort to say, hey man, until you get some really good armor, maybe we keep on the lighter armors for now, because keeping at least the middle dodge roll is going to be very important for you. And Souls players will kind of understand this, and Souls players will know to put enough levels and enough points into their equip load to keep that down. And they'll know, we shouldn't be putting 20 points into strength to maximize damage. Because again, you put 10 extra points into strength and you do, maybe 10% more damage. You put 10 more points into health and you double your health, right? So like one of these things is significantly better than the other. Do you get what I'm trying to say here? And as a Souls player, you might understand this. As a Diablo player, you might not get this. As a player new to the genre as a whole, this makes very little sense to you, okay? So I'm just trying to say, getting a good enough, comfortable character does rely on previous Souls experience. And this game is hard, okay? So this isn't like Diablo where you can kind of screw around for 50 levels before it catches up with you. You screw around for like 5-6 levels, and you might find yourself in a very difficult situation even. Okay, now here's the thing. Once you have a few levels and a good upgraded weapon, the game difficulty decreases substantially. Once you start upgrading your weapon, it seems to be about 15 to 20% more damage per upgrade. So, once you get those first 3 upgrades on your weapon, and you're doing like 50-60% more damage, that's a significant damage increase, right? You're at the point where your basic combo plus maybe a special ability can kill enemies. So you're at the point where you can actually parry and do a full punish and get the kill on an enemy, right? You're at the point where you can actually start pushing through content pretty good. But the problem is, once again, we're relying on previous Souls experience, that upgrading your weapon is of utmost priority, right? And we're relying on previous Souls experience. Well, actually, we're not, because often getting weapon drops is complete randomness. In fact, it's not often. I think it's pretty much, I don't think there's a single guaranteed weapon drop in the game right now. I think the first boss can guarantee a two-handed weapon. I think that's about it. So you need to be a bit lucky to get a weapon drop. If you're trying to do a faith build, you need to get a faith weapon to drop for you. If you want to do, you know, a dexterity build, you need to get a dexterity weapon to drop for you. And it's not even as easy as just getting a normal one. It's pretty simple to get a normal, to get a dexterity weapon drop. But if you actually want a blue or a purple, like actual good weapon drops, pure randomness. Getting into that second zone and comfortably killing those enemies does rely on getting decent weapons. This is an ARPG. Your weapons will have stats on them. This isn't like Diablo, okay? You can very easily find a sword that has a special stat that just reduces the stamina cost to swing the weapon by like 20%. Which, as you might imagine, is you know, that's a pretty substantial amount of stamina cost for it. You can find a weapon that potentially just gives you healing, free healing. I found a helmet that just gave me health regeneration permanently, which was insane, right? And that was just off a helmet. And part of the problem is, in a lot of these ARPGs, the first like 10 levels will have less difficulty than usual, because they don't want a player to not find any good drops, get to level 10 and realize like, man, this sucks. But this game kicks you out of the door. Your character is already like, you already feel very underleveled and underpowered right as you start the game, and unless you start finding some good drops and getting to a good build, it's not going to feel any better. It's just going to feel worse and worse and worse and worse. Okay. As I mentioned earlier, most enemies will have pretty good poise on their attacks, and you won't be able to just hit stun them with a basic weapon. But again, as you get heavier armor, as you get more HP, as your heavy armor gives you more poise, as you get bigger weapons, if you're just trying to do a big boy build, as I did, shocking, I know, I tried to do a big boy build with heavy armor and a two-handed weapon, you will start to be able to hit stun enemies out of their attacks. You will be able to trade with them, and your heavy armor will start absorbing damage pretty consistently. And as you double your health bar through putting some points into it, you will start feeling way, way stronger and way more reliable. But that relies on you kind of knowing, you know, to do this stuff. It's not a good, what I'm trying to say here throughout the entire video, if you want one takeaway, this is just not a great new experience for new players. That's the takeaway of this entire video, and that's something that seriously needs to be mentioned, because I do think that this game isn't even a bad game over time. I think it's actually a pretty decent game over time. I think it's got some good stuff in it, right? But the new player experience is just insanely bad. It's just it's really bad is all I can say. So that's all I have to say. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.